Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, fueling philanthropic programs and dedicated to creating educational and professional opportunities for Alaska Native people.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this Saturday, the 2nd of April. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that anytime by listening to Marine VHF or your NOAA Weather Radio or going online to weather.gov/Alaska. The weather info line is open at 800-472-0391. You can find that anytime as well. And if you write down the numbers as you're dialing there, you don't have to listen to the prompts every single time. You can always find information on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Of course, in the afternoon, you'll get your daily afternoon map briefing. And during the day, in between the Alaska weather shows, of course, on Facebook, you can find out the little statistics and little tidbits that help round out your Alaska weather experience, such as yesterday when we were talking about some above normal heat around south central and southwestern Alaska, and just days before, it was the same thing for southeastern Alaska. In the meantime, it's still winter in the interior and the North Slope and across the west coast and the Seward Peninsula. Winter weather advisories continue for many areas. In fact, all these regions shaded in yellow are under some type of winter weather advisory. Most areas are looking at about 4 to 6 inches of snow, 4 to 7 in some cases there for storm totals. And in many cases, it's also added in with a little bit of wind there. It's strong and gusty winds up to around 35, sometimes 45 miles per hour, limiting visibility. So if you don't have to go out tonight, again, it's one of those good situations there where you might want to just sit by the fire and stay warm tonight and visit with your family instead of running around town or perhaps just stepping outside just to check on the weather. Looks like the winter weather will continue as we head into tonight and tomorrow, with some of that easing up as we head into Sunday evening there. So do look for some improvement as we head into early next week. We'll take a look at the surface charts here in just a minute. In the meantime, it is that time of the year where we have to start talking about river breakup. And right now we're not seeing a whole lot in the way of breaking up across the Kuskokwim or the Yukon or any of our other main rivers of the Susitna. But as of March 30th, this is what the map looks like. As we get into Monday, we'll get another update there from the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. And as things start to pick up as far as activity goes and changes seen on the rivers around your village, we'd love to know about that. You can go to aprfc.arh.noaa.gov. The other website that might be a little bit easier is weather.gov/aprfc. That stands for Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. And as they get your information, and as River Watch begins here in a couple of weeks, we'll start to update this map and fill this in. As you can see right now on the scale, most rivers are mostly ice. And again, with your information, that helps round out the weather picture and perhaps can help the village below you. So it's a team effort, as you know. And if your community isn't following or tracking River Watch, make sure you check that out on Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center's website there, aprfc.arh.noaa.gov. Here's a look at the satellite picture now across all of Alaska, and that giant swirl moving across Bristol Bay is our current weather maker. As this moves northward, we're drawing in more warm and wet air across south central Alaska. The big dark looming clouds over the mountains, a sign of spring, convection there, upward moving air that eventually in the summertime could certainly turn into thunderstorm activity. But all that warm and wet air as it moves northward is cooling off, and as it moves over the Brooks Range and over the Yukon Valley, it's making snow. And this whole process here is sending a great deal of moisture up across the North Slope and across the western parts of Alaska. This is wrapping around and becoming colder air descending southward toward the Aleutians, St. Paul, Nunivak Island, the YK Delta, after seeing several inches of snow and then rain to harden that. Is kind of a gloomy mess right now in places like Newtok and northward. Thank you for all of the pictures that you're sharing with me on Facebook. I appreciate that. Out across the eastern Gulf of Alaska, you can see Yakutat, Sitka, the long line of clouds stretching up out of the Pacific Northwest and over the Copper River Basin right into Fairbanks. There are a lot of the cloud cover just grazing the outer coast of southeastern Alaska today, but not enough of it really creeping in just yet to really open up the wet weather floodgates just yet. There have been a few areas of light rainfall, it looked like, across southern southeast earlier today, but by and large, most of that has kind of held off from the region. Out across the west, once again, you can see the southerly flow working toward the central and western chain. That again creating murky clouds across a large part of the central and western Bering, St. Matthew Island, and some of that showing up as ice. Here's a look at the satellite picture in visible form now out across most areas in the west. If you look carefully, here's a lot of cloud streets, these lines coming off showing the very cold air moving over the ice pack. And this right here, the white and grayish zone from St. Matthew all the way up towards St. Lawrence Island and then down to Nunivak Island, all of this is ice. It's relatively clear sky, and again that ice starting to move southward, breaking off strips and chunks there and melting as it moves further and further south. In the meantime, high pressure sitting across the central and eastern Gulf. A lot of that again helping to keep most of the moisture out of southeastern Alaska. As you look northward, there's the moisture working over the middle and upper Yukon Valley into the southern Brooks Range. Low pressure sitting right off the Seward Peninsula at 996 millibars, and colder air trying to drop southward just shy of 1,000 millibars west of Ammonok in the YK Delta. By tonight, that front doesn't seem to move very much. It's trying to creep eastward, but remember, we've got this wall of very warm and wet air sitting right across southeast and south central Alaska. What that could do for many in south central and southeast is provide perhaps a clear sky for aurora or northern lights viewing tonight. Several waves from the sun have been moving toward Earth, and the levels are around 5 or 6 right now from the Space Weather Prediction Center. So if you like to track the northern lights, you got your alerts set up on your phone, or you like to check the website from UAF, Gina, it's a very easy thing to do, and find your good dark spot outside, get away from any street lights or city lights, and take your camera with you. Could be a good night there if you're in the right spot and you have a clear sky, which is always the trick, especially around coastal parts of Alaska. You folks in the interior have it pretty easily most of the time. However, clouds will not be your friend tonight if you're in the interior around Fairbanks. And looking northward, snow showers are expected across the Brooks Range and around the Kotzebue Sound region. Low pressure down to 105 millibars there. Periods of rain and snow showers still found around coastal parts of southwest, and light rain expected across the Alaska Peninsula with low pressure across the southern Gulf. Another front working northward will add more moisture to southeast weather picture tomorrow. And again, it looks like a better chance of rain developing from south to north across the Panhandle by Sunday afternoon. You'll notice that front across the Brooks Range isn't moving very much. It's a stationary front, so that implies it's not moving already, but it's still not changing from day to day there. It's just kind of hovering right across the Brooks Range, and that is focusing moisture and lift to produce more clouds and more snow across the region. It's also trapping some faster moving wind right across the north slope, so blowing and drifting snow could be a problem as we go into Sunday and Monday. And it looks like the opportunity for at least more winter weather advisories will certainly be there if that continues. So keep an eye on that and factor that into your plans for your startup on Monday. For Kotzebue Sound, periods of snow will be present, as well as areas around the Seward Peninsula. And it looks like rain and snow showers still a likely issue as we get into the end of the weekend for the Yukon Delta region, as well as light rain from about the Yukon Delta down toward Kodiak Island and the central and eastern chain, with low pressure moving up toward the Sand Point region in the eastern Aleutians. Pockets of gusty winds should be expected, especially across the Pacific coast. Here's a look at Monday now, and the front expands across all of the Gulf, a 979 millibar low there. And for parts of southeast, periods of rain should be expected to start up the week. You'll notice the frontal boundary there wiggles just a little bit across the Chukchi seacoast, with low pressure just off the Chukchi coast at 1,007 millibars. Warmer air is working northward, but it still looks like snow all the way through the Bering Strait and down toward St. Matthew. And clearer skies and drier weather is finally moving back into the Yukon Valley for the middle and upper valley especially, and maybe even parts of the Brooks Range, with some snow still around Arctic Valley or Arctic Village and southward toward Fort Yukon. So some changes and maybe some improvements northward as we head into Monday. Here's a look at temps today. 40s and 50s for southeast. You can see that warm air again punching northward with a frontal boundary just a little bit off to the south. We're still getting the healthy southerly flow there. 30s and 40s for most of south central. Valdez, one of the cooler spots at 39. Mid 40s for the Susitna Valley. 37 around Fairbanks today. 30 in Eagle. 47 for Northway. 10 in Fort Yukon, and colder still in Arctic Village. Anywhere from 10 to 15 below across the Arctic coast today. 13 below in Barrow. 15 above for Kivalina, and 22 in Kotzebue. It was 28 in Nome, 38 in Unalakleet, 27 in Galena, 38 for McGrath today. Tanana showing temperatures in the teens and low 20s today. 38 with Bethel. And Nunivak Island was only at 30. St. Lawrence Island showing 5. And southwest into Bristol Bay, we saw highs back in the mid to upper 40s today. Kodiak Island about the same, 48 there in Kodiak City. Low to mid 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. Sand Point was 43. Cold Bay and Falls Pass closer to 40 degrees. With Unalaska and Dutch Harbor closer to 43. The Pribilofs in the lower 30s. Adak and Atka on either side of 40 and 30 out at Attu this afternoon. South Central's temperatures tonight will dip into the upper 20s to lower 30s. Most areas probably still above freezing. Southeast in the 30s and 40s tonight with the capital city as well as Haines and Skagway on the warmer side of things. For the Alaska Peninsula, upper 30s to low 40s there, mid 30s for the Aleutians. Around the YK Delta, upper 20s and lower 30s tonight. Nome sitting at 19, 23 below for Barrow. The Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks in the upper 20s with South Central's Susitna Valley and Copper River Basin likely also in the 20s overnight. High temperatures tomorrow in southeast, closer to 50 degrees, a little bit milder for you today. Upper 40s for many in South Central, 44 in Kodiak. Mid 40s are possible around the Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks tomorrow. A lot of warm air still spreading northward and moving north of the Yukon Valley. Teens, though, as you get into the Brooks Range for AKwx Pass, only 16 there, 7 below in Barrow and much colder for the North Slope once again. Teens and 20s for Kotzebue Sound, Shishmaref about 25, just shy of 30 in Nome. The YK Delta generally in the upper 30s around the coast. Interior could be a little bit closer into the 40s there and around southwest, probably closer to 50 as you get out toward King Salmon and Dillingham. The Aleutians back in the upper 30s to lower 40s. So many places looking at milder weather tomorrow. Here's flying weather. IFR conditions from the Aleutians all the way into the northern parts of the YK, Norton Sound, most of the Seward Peninsula, and the Brooks Range and north of the Yukon Valley. Looking at IFR conditions there. Look for improvements quickly in southeast there where some of the channels will be IFR in the morning. Look for IFR conditions to recede across the west with MVFR conditions for Norton Sound and parts of the YK Delta as we get into the afternoon. IFR still lingering across the western Brooks Range, moving northward out of Kotzebue Sound for the afternoon tomorrow. Past conditions show AKwx Pass at IFR. It looks like we'll see slightly different conditions in Adigan Pass tomorrow down toward MVFR by the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass also splitting the difference with Merrill looking better at VFR. Make a choice for MVFR for a Lake Clark Pass tomorrow. Rainy Pass seeing some improvements throughout the day. Look for Windy Pass to also move toward VFR conditions through the afternoon. Isabel Pass looking all right. Mentasta Pass going to call VFR there, and for Tanita Pass for your Sunday. Portage Pass, we expect to see VFR throughout the day, and Chilcoot and White Pass right now look pretty good. Freezing levels show that that really big warm air punch that was covering up most of the Gulf earlier this week is now receding, and surface cold air is taking over most of the state, dropping southward once again. Icing potential lingers across the North Slope below 2,000 feet. Some of that could easily reach widespread moderate. And out across the Yukon Delta southward toward the Pribilofs above 4,000 feet. The risk is there as well. Draped along the frontal boundary stretching out across the northern Gulf anywhere from 4 to about 5,000 feet. Watch for occasional moderate across parts of the southern Alaska Peninsula and eastern chain above 6,000 feet for tomorrow. Our jet stream is starting to change shape just a little bit. We still have the main superhighway of weather down across the northern Pacific and just out of reach of Alaska, but a few tendrils of this fast-moving air starts to move northward out across southwestern Alaska and across the North Slope. Those wind speeds there around 50 to 60 knots when it enters into the picture. Southerlies, though, are the predominant force across the west, anywhere from 15 to 35 knots, especially around coastal parts of western Alaska. On the other side of that, of course, are those stronger northerlies, about 20 to 25. For southeast, we see a southeasterly wind coming up the outside there. This really wrapping around high pressure that extends all the way down into the Pacific Northwest. You see that a little bit better here at 3,000 feet with still the main dominant flow coming in from the south across the Alaska Peninsula. The YK Delta, Norton Sound, and Kotzebue Sound at about 20 to as high as 40 knots. Considerably lighter winds across the interior, 5 to maybe as high as 20. Tomorrow's turbulence then focuses under those faster moving winds across the Alaska Peninsula, the coastal areas and the capes of the YK Delta, Norton Sound below 3,000 to 4,000 feet, and across the Chukchi Seacoast below 5,000 feet. Watch for occasional moderate there. Most other areas look A-OK. Again, factor in the visibility and, of course, the opportunity for freezing precipitation. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
I could see Seward, just a mass of flames, and I just wondered at first if the world hadn't come to an end.
was violent and it was frightening. Earthquake, tidal wave, tsunami was just foreign to me.
It was about 125 feet high, and it was traveling at about 100 miles an hour.
All these people that died in the harbor down there were friends of ours. We knew every one of them.
We had quite an earthquake up here. Glacier split in the ocean and everything.
Lituya Bay, it's a formidable place.
I don't think we could have survived an 800-foot wave. 120 feet was bad enough.
It's the largest tsunami wave on record.
God, what an awful sight. It's like the end of the world.
Good evening, I'm Tom Skilling at Lituya Bay on the Gulf of Alaska. This is one of the most beautiful yet remote locations on Earth. The only way to get here is by boat or float plane. Tonight, we're here to talk about American tsunamis. The world got an education on tsunamis when a massive earthquake in Asia prompted a giant wave in December that wiped out communities on 3 continents. Tsunamis have hit the Alaskan shoreline long before the Asian tsunami. In fact, what happened here on a July night in 1958 created a mammoth wave that at one point would have cleared the Sears Tower by almost 300 feet. It was a cataclysmic collision of natural forces never before seen on Earth.
All right, let's do it.
The native people from the area have a legend about Lituya Bay, and they say that whenever you cross that bar, come in that opening into the bay, that 2 brown bear run down either side of the inlet and grab the water and shake it to warn of your arrival.
Surrounded on 3 sides by rock and ice, one side by water, history describes Lituya Bay as a spooky space. It's tucked away on the southwest coast of Glacier Bay National Park, about 120 miles west of Juneau. Tourists are drawn to the waters of Glacier Bay by its vast array of wildlife: humpback whales, orcas, sea lions, sea otters, and bears. But National Weather Service meteorologist Chris Mayer in Juneau says Glacier Bay is no Lituya Bay.
Lituya Bay has served as a refuge for mariners for years now. Essentially, the fishing fleet that works out in the Gulf of Alaska, they're able to come in here and seek safe harbor from those storms and the big waves that are associated with them.
Lituya Bay is the only place for fishermen and mariners to seek shelter along 100 miles of rugged coastline. But much like an oasis, sailors have to navigate Lituya Bay's narrow opening and boat-crushing currents to reach its still waters.
Because of the large tides that we have in southeast Alaska, the entrance of Lituya Bay has currents that have been clocked as fast as 12 knots or 14 miles per hour. And so there's only certain times when there's a slack tide that mariners want to traverse through that narrow entrance to get in here. Many vessels have been lost trying to get in, navigate through that entrance region.
Quite a few boats have gone down trying to get into bay when they should have probably waited until the tide changed and tried to get in there. And that's where La Perouse, the French explorer, lost his 22 people.
They lost so many men that they named the island in the middle of Lituya Bay Centipath Island, and they left a notice saying, "Cry with us for those that we have lost."
To visit Lituya Bay is to understand why this area is so tsunami prone. Earthquakes happen frequently here, and they're big. And the terrain is steep, steeper almost than anywhere else on the planet. On the night of July 9th, a massive part of that mountain broke off and cascaded into the water. It hit with force that scientists likened to that of an asteroid. The wave it created was over 1,700 feet high.
What happened in 1958 was one of the largest earthquakes to strike North America. That earthquake was right on the fault line that is in the back of Lituya Bay. The glacier that lies on that fault line, the North Glacier, the one they call Lituya Glacier, jumped up into the air and shook like crazy. Tremendous amounts of ice and mountain debris fell into the water.
Philip Fradkin's book, Wildest Alaska, likens the amount of rock, ice, and soil to the equivalent of 8 million dump truck loads. While one mountain crashed into the bay's deep waters, another peak rose 50 feet in an instant.
That rock fell into the head of the bay, caused a huge splash wave that measured up 1,722 feet, tore out all of the vegetation on the land. That wave proceeded to gain momentum and track down through the rest of the bay, and it wiped out everything along the beaches as far as the trees and vegetation. It's the largest tsunami wave on record.
Anywhere.
Anywhere in the world.
Scientists knew the next day how high the wave had splashed by measuring the trim line. In other words, the height to which trees had been scraped clean. That one wave took out 1 million trees. 6 people aboard 3 fishing boats, the Edrie, the Sunmore, and Badger, were witnesses to what happened. Only 4 of them lived to tell about it. Initially, word of the tsunami spread by ham radio.
Tidal wave came from the head of the bay from the glaciers, and he's okay. It broke his anchor chain, but he rode her out.
Fisherman Howard Ulrich and his little boy Sonny rode out the wave on the Edrie, anchored in Lituya Bay for the night.
As the wave came down, we could see it coming down the shoreline, so I tied the anchor chain off and thought I could run the boat ahead and pull the anchor loose, but it didn't. It just turned us around, and so we were actually sideways to the wave by the time the wave got there, and the only thing I could do was back down on the boat to get the bow of the boat into the wave, and then put the boat in gear and go up the wave.
There was a tidal wave in here, and if there's any other boats in here, I don't think they made it. I don't see them and I don't hear them.
We'll continue to look at tsunami awareness issues as we head through the remainder of the week, as it is time, this time of the year is when we always talk about that as we remember some of the great quakes and waves that have affected Alaska. Here's a look at the marine forecast for tomorrow in southeast. You're looking at northerlies remain pretty light, about 10 to 15, 2 to 3 foot seas on the inside, 4 foot seas as you get down into the Clarence Strait region. About 15 to 25 across the outer coast. Notice predominantly an easterly offshore flow continues there, so the weather perhaps still looking pretty good, but that southeasterly flows creeping northward as we go through Sunday, and it'll pick up even more from the south as we get into Monday. With that comes that wetter weather and more clouds, of course. Northerlies across the Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage further south, about 15 knots, 3 foot seas there. Southerlies back in the Clarence Strait, and south and southeasterlies across the outer coast with winds around 20 knots. For south central, look for a light northeasterly flow in northern Cook Inlet. That picks up the further south you go past Calgon Island, with easterlies over the Barrens at 25 knots, 6 to 7 foot seas there, and south and easterly winds over Kodiak Island, 20 to 25. A light northerly flow inside of Prince William Sound. Variable winds as you get into the northern Gulf. That becomes easterly with time as we get into Monday, 25 to 30 knots, and northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet to areas west of the Barrens at 15 to 25. Inside of Shelikof Strait, winds really pick up to 35 knots from the east with an 8 foot sea expected there. Northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound on Monday, 15 knots with a 2 foot sea. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, look for east and southeasterly winds to pick up, 25 to 30 there, 6 foot seas inside of Bristol Bay, and 25 to 35 knots across the Pacific coastline with 8 to 12 foot seas on Sunday. Expecting 35 knots across the Pacific coast for Monday, all from the east, with 15 foot seas expected. There's 6 foot seas inside of Bristol Bay, 10 foot seas as you move down the Bering Sea coast toward Cold Bay and out toward the Aleutians. As we get out further west on Sunday, look for northerlies in just about all areas, the exception from Unalaska to Nikolsky with a northeasterly flow, 25 to 35 foot seas on the Bering Sea coast side there, and 9 foot seas on the Pacific coast with 8 to 9 foot seas out in the western chain as you head into Sunday afternoon. For Monday, a little bit of a change there. Westerlies come in with 6 to 8 foot seas on a 20 to 25 knot wind. Otherwise, north and westerly winds continue there, 20 to 35 for the Bering Sea coast and 30 to 40 knot winds on the Pacific coast with 12 to 13 foot seas by Monday afternoon. For the west coast, north and easterlies over the ice for St. Lawrence Island and north of Nunivak Island. St. Matthew looking at northerlies at 25 with easterlies over the Kuskokwim Bay at 30 knots with a 6 foot sea. Northerlies over the Pribilofs with 25 knots and a 6 foot sea there. For Monday, easterlies over the St. Lawrence Island, northeasterly winds north of Nunivak Island with northerlies over the Pribilofs with a 7 foot sea there. Winds remain from the east over the Kuskokwim Delta around 30 knots though with an 8 foot sea on Monday. And across the Arctic coast, easterlies are blowing over the coastline about 25 to 30 knots. A northeasterly blow around Cape Lisburn and Point Hope, and easterlies moving out of Kotzebue Sound at 20 knots. For Monday, winds diminish there down to 15 knots, but they stay up around 20 to 35 for most of the Beaufort Sea coast and the Chukchi coast, 20 to 30 knots for the Chukchi Sea by Monday afternoon. Let's recap your weather for tonight. Most areas around the Yukon Valley and northward, including Tanana and all the way out to the Chukchi coast, and many areas in the North Slope, including areas around Point Barrow and the northern coast of the Seward Peninsula, are under a winter weather advisory for storm totals that could bring you as much as 4 to maybe even 7 inches of snow. A winter weather advisory usually includes wind in Alaska. In this case, that's true. So a wind will be moving that snow around and could create areas of poor visibility from tonight onward into Sunday morning, perhaps even Sunday evening in many cases. And that's all due to low pressure sitting out around Kotzebue Sound and north, moving up the Chukchi Sea coast, increasing the wind and the pressure gradient across the north coast as we head into Sunday and Monday. For many in southeast, clouds are moving northward, but as we head into tonight, many in southeast and south central have a decent chance at seeing the aurora. It looks like there's going to be a good wave of solar energy moving toward the northern hemisphere there, so keep an eye out for that if you're up late tonight and find a good dark spot. Low pressure south of Sand Point in the eastern chain at 982 millibars will continue expanding out over the Gulf, bringing warm and wet air to the coastal areas as we start up the week, and more snow is expected in the west as we start up Monday afternoon. Thanks for watching Alaska.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.